are now tuned in to Mind, Body, and Soul with Annette, where your hosts, Annette Harris, analyze intriguing life questions and concerns, such as, do Christians suffer from mental illness? Have you wondered why they act abnormal? Or you may ask, what is really going on in their minds? Do you need Annette? Well, keep listening for a biblical understanding of the psychology of the mind.
All right. Welcome to another session of Mind, Body, and Soul with Annette. And I am, of course, your host, Annette Harris. Before we go further, we must acknowledge the Lord in prayer. Lord, we thank you for this wonderful day. We thank you for what you have done for us and how you've blessed us to see it. We ask that you would get the glory out of whatever we do. Word our mouths, give us what to say in the name of Jesus. And I also like to quote our opening scripture, Hosea 4:6, the basis for mind, body, and soul. My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. Because thou hast rejected knowledge, I will also reject thee. And again, we believe the Lord has given us that scripture because he wants us to attain the knowledge and information that we need as we move about our daily lives. And I am so glad that you have joined me on this afternoon for another session. Today is Wednesday, June 14th, 2017. And I tell you, the time is moving right along. I am excited. I'm glad. We're, I guess, in the middle of the year now. June is 6 months. And, you know, it's moving along. Today, I am going to actually host another, well, she's not a new guest to our show. She is returning. She was on a couple of weeks ago, and I'm going to read a little bit of her bio for those of you who did not join us and were not able to be introduced to her. I'm going to let you know who we are talking with on today. Joyce Graham. She's an LPC, licensed professional counselor. She's a gifted evangelist, a teacher, a renowned author of several books and articles. She prepares and delivers affirming messages that are highly effective in relaying and restoring fundamental Christian values. Joyce received a master's degree with an emphasis in counseling from the University of Missouri, St. Louis. And upon graduating, she established her own private counseling practice in her hometown of St. Louis, Missouri. Joyce's specialties are in the areas of depression, grief, and anxiety, and she counsels adults, adolescents, and children. She has 3 grown children and has been married to Carl T. Graham Sr. for over 35 years. So welcome again to Mind, Body, and Soul, Joyce Graham. You know, Joyce, for some reason, I kept wanting to call you doctor. And I did that a couple of times in my post, so excuse me if that slips out because.
Oh no, I appreciate that, and maybe that's a good omen.
Maybe so.
I do plan to pursue my doctorate, so.
Okay.
You're fine.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you for joining us again on today. I want to let my listeners know that there are 3 different ways you can listen to us on today. You can join in on the conversation here on Facebook Live. I have the Facebook Live feed. You can also go to YouTube. We are live on YouTube as well at this present time. And then, of course, also the radio station's website, which is IntellectualRadio.com. So if you're listening on one and you may be not getting a good reception for whatever reason, you have the other 2 avenues that you can go to. We don't want you to miss anything that we're giving you on today. So I see you here on Facebook Live and you're coming in, and it's good to see you there as well. I've already said hello to some of you. Wanda, I see you here. Elder Kevin McGee, good to have you. He also has a radio show here at Intellectual Radio on Saturdays, and I believe it's called The Connections. Okay, and he has a wonderful show. Always have wonderful guests on as well. Pastor Ricky Riddle, good to see you. Art Lewis, good to have you watching as well. My cousin Jamone in California, good to see you. And then also my cousin Quinn, good to have you all watching. Make sure you go ahead and hit the share button on today because we're going to be discussing post-traumatic stress disorder. And I had asked a question in my earlier post on today. Do you not realize that this particular I guess you can call it a disorder or what would you describe PTSD as, Joyce?
It's actually a disorder. It's a disorder because, even though mental disorder and mental illness, those two terms are used interchangeably, but there is a slight difference. And the best way to differentiate between the two is mental illness is when the brain is physically impaired and the individual may be suffering from an abnormality of the brain. Whereas a mental disorder is when a person is affected more so by an external event, like a situation or a circumstance or something of that nature, and then it results in abnormal functioning, day-to-day functioning, like going to work or interacting with family and friends, things like that.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you for that. I was mentioning in my earlier post on today, a lot of times, and we know this, when we hear post-traumatic stress disorder or PTSD, we automatically think of the military and those who have served in the military. And, maybe when they come back from the military, they're going through certain situations and maybe they're not dealing, with, issues, life issues, the way we probably think that they should. Sometimes we may say, oh, maybe they have PTSD because they were in the military. Maybe they're having flashbacks or something like that. But we must realize that it's not limited to the military. And I want to let everyone know that. We've said that before. We want to reiterate that again, that it is not limited to the military. You can go through different things in life, certain situations, like you said, outside factors that affect you, and you have never even set foot in the military. You've never even enlisted. So we must realize that it can affect anyone, definitely anyone. Now, I want to maybe stop right here and to say, we are going to be dedicating today's session to our fathers. We know that Father's Day is coming up this coming Sunday. And so I wanted to bring both of these subjects in together and try and relate PTSD and our dads. Now, if I can say right now, happy Father's Day to each of you. If I, don't get a chance to talk to you before the Sunday comes, I want to say happy Father's Day. And I see plenty of them here on my Facebook Live right now. You fathers, happy Father's Day to you. We do appreciate all that you do, and we appreciate you taking care of your families and your children. I'm looking here, Pastor Riddle, he always calls his children his crew. So we appreciate you all for taking time out and being a father, being a dad. So you're welcome, Mark. I see you there. Let's go here. Dr. Joyce, I'm going to just say that. Maybe I am speaking something into existence. I don't know.
I'll take that.
Okay, not a problem. Now, when I inboxed you and said I wanted to kind of, tie these two in together, what were some of your initial thoughts when I talked about PTSD and dads? Because there's so much that we can cover with this, but what were your initial thoughts?
Well, probably like most people, I automatically started thinking about post-traumatic stress in terms of the military, actually. But then as I began to do some further reading, I came to understand that it's not only attributed to military combat. It could be a father or a man can develop post-traumatic stress from a lot of different, I'll just say, scenarios.
Okay.
And especially since I thought about that most men, and women too, but most men are first responders, typically. They're first responders in any serious situation with their family. And so they can experience some emotional distress either physical or mental or emotional in those cases. So I became my level of understanding became more heightened in the sense of that it's not just unique to the military, but in any situation, a father or a man can be affected and can develop PTSD.
Mm-hmm. You know, it's interesting. You just said something that really caught my attention. You said most men, correct me if I'm wrong, you said most men are first responders.
Mm-hmm.
That's something to pause and think about right there, because you're so accurate in that. And any kind of like you say, any trauma or any emergency that comes up, they will react first or respond first. And I think that's essential, and it's very important for a man, for a father to be like that.
Mm-hmm.
Because you even think about the children. The first thing they think about, oh, daddy, I got to get to daddy. Or typically that's really what it should be. Now I know we have the single parent homes with just the mothers there or whatever, but typically a girl like me myself, I'm run to my daddy. I want him to help, or in this situation, whatever it is, I want my dad's strength. That's what he would represent to me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I can understand how you're saying that men are first responders. That's very good. And
you'd be surprised in that even if the father is not in the home, just like you said, children, and even that estranged mom, if you will, when the father and the mother are not still involved in active relationship, they still gravitate towards that father.
Right.
And they would still contact that father even though he may not be in the home.
Right. Definitely. And and it's important for them to be able to still contact him.
Mm-hmm.
This may be kind of getting off into something else a little bit, but I just appreciate how, now my parents were divorced when I was young, but my dad was always there for us. He would have his weekends with us, and I appreciated that fact. Now, my dad he was an entrepreneur, and so he had, various ways of making income. He one of them, he was a taxi cab driver. Now, when I was young, I would be ashamed if he come around his taxi cab. I have no idea why I was ashamed. He was paying for everything, so doing, but I was ashamed. But as I got older, I started appreciating, the fact that he's a cab driver. He can get me to where I need to go. But I said all that to say he was definitely there. He was in our lives, and mom did not keep him away from us. Unfortunately, you do have that where the parents are divorced or never married, where sometimes the women may use the children against the dad or something like that. But I'm so grateful and appreciative that my mom did not do that. Now, whatever reason they became divorced, that was their issue. She did not bring that to the children. She did not, what I'm saying? She didn't put us in the middle of that or turn us against our father. And I know I've said this on my show before. She never turned us against him. She never talked bad about him to us. And Dr. Joyce, I was appreciative. When I really realized how important that was the year that she passed away. She passed away in 1999. Now, my dad was still here. And I said, I thought to myself, if she had ever done that, look who was still left on earth. My dad was still here. What I'm saying? So we would have had to try and reconcile with him and whatever. And my dad just passed away, but in his latter years, he needed us. His girls that were still here. He needed us. And if my mom had turned us against him or anything, then we probably would have been, oh, we don't care about him or something like that, or, what have you. But I appreciated her using that wisdom, you know what I mean? And not bringing us into that, because whatever they had, that was their issue, the reason why they weren't together. But I know I kind of got off into something else there. But
well, you know what? you said something that really is very interesting, and I hope I'm not getting off topic, but we are talking about fathers.
Right.
And we'll get more into the post-traumatic stress disorder in a bit, but I did want to say this, in that research has shown and proven that there is a chemical connection between a biological father and his children, particularly the girls. They say that, and when the daughters and the father have that connection and that bonding and that relationship, that there's actually a chemical that kind of, the chemical of the father and the chemical of the daughter that binds together.
Okay.
And that is really beneficial to the development of that daughter.
Wow.
And it's been proven that now, of course, we have some situation where there are surrogate fathers, like a stepfather, so forth. But it's been proven that the biological father of that particular daughter, there is a chemical between the father and the daughter that interacts together and causes that special, unique bond that you just talked about.
Right.
That's not like no other bonding.
Wow.
And it's a chemical thing, of course, that God himself, kind of called into play, that God himself instituted.
Wow.
So,
Oh, that is so deep. That is so deep. And that is so my story too. And I actually, I would often think, when I was coming along, that it was very important, because when I was coming along, they would always stress the importance of, the fathers and the male and his son, that relationship, which is very important. But I would often think, okay, well, don't leave out the girls, don't leave out the daughters, because it's very important for us too.
Absolutely.
And, my brother passed away when he was 20. And he was the only boy. So then it was just us three girls left.
Oh.
And, my dad, he would always tease me and say, you know what, you act like you're my mom. Because I was kind of overbearing. I'm not going to even lie. Now my daddy, you couldn't mess with my daddy.
Now, where do you fall in the siblings?
I'm the baby.
Oh, okay. Same here. Okay.
I am the youngest, so you can understand.
I can relate totally.
Right,
yeah.
right. So he would always tell me, he would tease me because his mom passed away and was in 93, I believe. He would always tell me, "Oh, you always act like you're my mom." And I said, "Well, she had to leave somebody in charge when she left the earth." That was just a little joke. But, it was just, but my dad and I, we had that, oh my God, that father baby girl connection there. Oh, and I totally agree with that statement, that chemical connection. That's deep, what you just told us. Very deep, very deep. And it does, attest to the development of the daughter. I totally agree with that. And, I have a soft spot in my heart right now when I see fathers and daughters. When I see, that father taking his daughter on a daddy-daughter date or something. Now, sometimes I'm looking here on Facebook and I'm seeing, the daddy-daughter dances, and they're putting up pictures. Oh, I love that. It just,
those are precious.
Yes. I know we're kind of good, but we're still on topic. We're talking about dads.
I think we are.
We're talking about dads today, and we do want to appreciate them. I was listening to, I believe it was a show on last evening. Good friend of mine, Lady Rochelle, she had a show on called Warriors Talk, and I believe it was on, her show was on Monday. I was able to listen to it on yesterday, and she mentioned about how, and it's true, when it comes to Mother's Day and Father's Day, when you want to go out for dinner or something on Mother's Day, you can't even hardly get in a restaurant. And when
so true.
And when it comes to Father's Day, you can just walk right in,
Why is that? I don't know.
That's what I was going to ask you. But but you know what? I was talking to a good friend of mine on today, and he's a father. And we kind of, we're talking about that and how it seems as if the fathers, it doesn't seem like that they are acknowledged, like they should be. And I asked him, I said, why do you think that is? because I think we even talked about the restaurant thing too. He said, well, the only thing I can think of is the very fact that, okay, as a mother, you know, if that's your biological child, then you've birthed that child. That child became one with you, and there's still that connection, you know, there. So sometimes your children would kind of tend to lean more towards that mother side of the family than it will the father side of the family. And he said maybe it's just that connection because she birthed them. You know, that's what he came up with. So I mean, that's a very good question though. Why does it seem like that? You know, because they are important. They really are.
And you know, I think too that it seems that fathers and men in general don't really require a lot of validation.
Okay.
I think as much as mothers do. It just seems that, you know, I believe they are acknowledged as being the head of the home and being that source of strength that we rely so much on.
Right.
But they don't seem to need that much validation, or they don't seem to need that much endorsement, if you will, as a woman would. Now, that's not saying that women are weak or anything like that.
Okay.
It's just that I don't believe that fathers really require that type of attention.
Now, do you think that they have been trained to think that way? Or is it because of what is maybe presented to them? Maybe because they don't get that validation, or, you know, as you're saying, that they probably don't really need it. But is it because they don't really get it, and so then they just kind of fall in line with it? Do you know what I mean?
Yes, I think it's a little bit of both.
Okay.
I think that they just gotten used to not really having it, and so therefore they don't expect it. I think they lowered their expectations on being celebrated like a mother would be. And so I think it's a little bit of both. And then the way that men, the way that boys are raised, they are raised, particularly African American men, that they don't show affection. They don't crave attention. You know, suck it up. Be a man. Don't cry. You know, don't show your weakness. Don't let them see you sweat. All of that is really reinforced in them, and so they grow up, you know, not really requiring a whole lot. And so I think they've just grown up and they've lowered their expectations of that kind of attention. And so I think it may make them uncomfortable. I know my husband, even if I'm celebrating him and I'm celebrating his birthday or I'm celebrating Father's Day, after a while, he'll take it for so long, but after a while, it's like enough already. You know, it tends to make him uncomfortable being the center of attention. I know that's not all men, that may be just unique to a few, but I'm finding that, and even when I talk to clients, if a man comes to me and if he presents in tears or if he's crying, then I give him full attention right away, because men don't usually come to therapy crying. To me in tears, then I know there is a serious issue going on with that particular man.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Oh, that's good. That's good. Oh, you're giving us some good nuggets today. Good nuggets. This is good. Okay. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go ahead and right here and maybe take a quick break. And then we'll come back, and I'm looking here. Wait, before we do a quick break, I'm looking at some comments here. I don't want to ignore anyone here on Facebook Live. I see Michelle Thomas. She said here, that question for Mother's/Father's Day, being crowded or not on those days, need to be asked of those who don't celebrate the fathers or take them out. She says she does the same for her dad as she does her mom.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good statement. That's a good statement. Yes.
That is good to give them equal attention. That's great.
Right. Definitely.
Great.
Definitely.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. Mother Charlie Believer. Well, I'm giving her whole name here on Facebook. Facebook, she has a name here, Mother Harris. She says her father was there and he was not there. She said, but her mom was always there. Now, that's something in and of itself, because that's probably another factor as well, because it would seem that it would probably be out of the norm if it wasn't like this, if a mother wasn't attentive to her children and wasn't always there, for her child. So I think that's probably another factor. That's probably why, the children would migrate more to the mom, because she's, that's that nurturer. She's there, she's nurturing, she's giving, them what they need, or being there for that child. And sometimes that child is in trouble, and here, that mama's right there. Right. Well, father may give out that tough love. And so, maybe the children will probably run to the mother quicker than they would the father anyway. I don't know, but
I think it depends on what's going on. I think it depends on what kind of situation that child is in. Now, if I fall and skin my knee, then I'm going to run to my mother. My mother's deceased and my father is also.
Right.
But if I needed money, now I would go to dad.
Of course.
If I need something material, I would go to dad. But if I need nurturing, if I needed to be consoled or comforted, then I would go to mom. I would just naturally gravitate to her because she took care of those kind of things. If I were to go to my dad with a skinned knee, he would just probably say something like, well, you're not dying, or something like that. But if I were to go to mom after I injured myself, my mom would say, oh, you poor baby. And she would grab me up in her arms and, and just take care of that thing that was hurting me. So I guess a lot, I think roles, how we've assigned roles also to the man and the woman has something to do with how we interact with either one.
Yes, I was just about to say that. So it's obviously role assignment has a whole lot to do with it.
Absolutely.
Role assignment for sure. Mother Harris also says here that she knows young men who went into the Army training and had to come home from a breakdown from the strenuous training, especially the Marines. Oh, wow. Okay. So she's, kind of going into the other side of the topic, talking about PTSD. Right, that's definitely something, I tell you, to deal with.
And she seemed like she's addressing the issue of even before the young man even gets into combat.
Yes.
He feels the stress of the training, because some people say that the training or boot camp is really harder than the actual being involved in, actual fighting or the actual activity of combat.
Wow.
Because I guess the way that they simulate it, because they have to simulate it and make it, as close to the real thing as they possibly can. So I guess that's a factor too, So that was a good point. That was a good point.
Yeah, that is a good point. And it would stand to reason that would make sense for them to make it as I guess you could say as bad as they can, or as similar as they can to the real thing. Then that way you'll know what you're made of.
Absolutely.
You'll know whether or not you can go, that you can go out there or go further than the training or not. So that's important. That's good. Well, okay. So what we'll do here, if you're just not tuning in, we're here on IntellectualRadio.com, and we are talking about fathers. Father's Day is coming up. We're also talking about PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, and we're also on YouTube Live, and I do have a Facebook Live feed up. I want to hear from you, and I thank those of you who have been commenting. I appreciate you joining in. We're going to, in a short while, take our first break, actually. And I'll have my producer play some music when we do that. But I want to recognize those that are on here. My cousin Jeannie, thanks for joining. Mama Deborah Brown, good to have you. Gloria Martin, thank you so much for joining. She said this is so good. She's enjoying it. Carolyn Webster, good to have you as well. All right, Gwen Jones, I'm seeing some names here I haven't seen in a while. Good to see you all. And Beatrice. Oh, thank you. She was commenting on my story about my mom. She said that was wisdom on her part, and I totally agree, when dealing with my dad. And let's see, Gloria says her dad was a taxi cab driver too. I didn't know that. My, we have such connection there. Janice Sims, good to have you here as well. Linda Lyles Daniels, glad you're watching. Thank you so much. Corey Wright, thank you for watching as well. Mark Durson, I know I mentioned you earlier. Tanya Clements, thank you for watching. Rizal, good to have you as well. So if you guys can do me a huge favor, hit the share button, and we would appreciate you sharing this information. We're going to go to a quick break right now, and we will come back to talk with Dr. Joyce Graham. We are here, Mind, Body, and Soul with Annette on Intellectual Radio.
What will you say when this glory comes down in the cloud to rest in the room? And what will you say when the atmosphere shifts and the yokes are destroyed off of you? And what will you say, my God, I will, when the pain suddenly leaves and now you can live in love again? And what will you say when all your tears turn into joy and all your doubts become immense? And everybody say, I'm so glad you came to rescue me.
I'm so glad you came to rescue me.
I'm so glad you came to rescue me.
I'm so glad you came to rescue
Oh
me.
Lord, I'm so glad you came to rescue me.
I'm so glad you came to rescue me.
I'm so glad you came to rescue me.
I'm so glad.
And what will you say when the lame begins to walk, all because you chose to lay your hand? And what will you say, when the blind begins to see and the deaf begins to hear again? Come on, y'all. And what will you say, my God, it will, when your home was gone closed because the banks, they just would not extend? But then the Lord, He moved the heart of man, and now you're home belongs to you again. But everybody say, I'm so glad you came to rescue me.
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 I'm so glad.
Everybody say, I'm so glad you came to rescue me.
I'm so glad you came to rescue
I
me.
said, I'm so glad you came to rescue me.
I'm so glad you came to
Everybody say, I'm so glad you came to rescue me.
I'm so glad you came to rescue me.
I'm so glad you came to rescue me.
I'm so glad.
We say, I'm so glad you came to rescue me.
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 Oh Lord, I'm so glad you came to rescue me.
I'm so glad you came to rescue me.
I'm so glad you came to rescue me.
I'm so glad
You came to rescue me, yeah.
you came to set me free.
To deliver me.
To deliver me.
I know that you did.
It all for me.
I know you did, know you did. You came to set me free. You came to deliver me.
Deliver me. You did it all for me.
Oh Lord,
You came to rescue me.
you came to set me free. You came to deliver me.
Deliver me.
You did it all for me. Yes, you did, yes, you did. You came to set me free.
To deliver me. You did it all for me.
Oh God,
To deliver me.
you came to deliver me and save
To
me.
deliver me. You did it all for me.
Yes, you did. To deliver me, yeah. Oh Lord, to deliver me.
You did it all for me.
I know that you did. Oh, I know that you love me. I know that you care for me. I know that you love me. I know that you care for me. I know that you love me. I know that you care for me. Oh Lord.
All right. Welcome back. You were listening to D. Wilkes and Friends. Good friend of mine, Damon Wilkerson, and he has a wonderful project out. I believe the name of that song was I'm So Glad. Rescue me. He rescued me. How many of you are glad the Lord rescued you? I tell you,
Yeah.
you're here listening to Mind, Body, and Soul with Annette. We are here on Intellectual Radio, also on YouTube and Facebook Live. And I'm so glad that you have decided to join us on today. And our topic, again, today, we're talking about PTSD. And we're also talking about our dads. We're coming along to, we're approaching, should I say, Father's Day on this coming weekend. And we want to encourage you all to celebrate our dad. Celebrate your dad. Now, I know mom may have had a huge impact in your life, and she may have been that nurturing one, as we talked earlier in the first portion of this session. But let's recognize our fathers. You know, they've done so much. Some of them have sacrificed so much for their families. They've sacrificed for their wives. They've sacrificed, for so whoever they whatever they've been involved in, and they've worked, and we just want to recognize them. We don't want to leave them out. Too often, unfortunately, we see that we can kind of look at that day just as another day. But let's try and do something different, something special for them. If your dad is still here on earth, we would encourage you to take them out. Your husband, if he's, a father, whether he's a father to your children or his own children, let's acknowledge that on this weekend. And let's see here on Facebook Live, Mother Harris says her dad and her husband are both deceased. When her husband was here, she would cook him a big dinner. He was such a good father to their 4 children. Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah. And it's interesting. It's beautiful, should I say, that you can reflect back on those memories, all that you heard when your husband was alive. Thank you so much for that, Mother Harris. Again, go ahead and hit the share button. We want to get this word out. We appreciate you all for joining us on Facebook Live. We're going to start talking about PTSD. And Dr. Joyce is here on the line with us. And where are you calling from? You're calling from St. Louis?
Yes, I'm calling from St. Louis, and it is storming here.
Is it?
That noise that you hear is thunder.
Oh, my.
Yes, really, we're having a huge downpour right now.
Oh, my. We pray the Lord will keep you all.
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you so much for taking time out to join us on today. So let us know if there's any, if you have to get off the phone or anything.
I will.
Okay. Well, let's go back. The first show we had you on a couple of weeks ago because we were actually talking about suicide versus millennials. And I had given to you a few questions that we wanted to try and tackle here on the session. And I see here you went ahead and inboxed them. That's wonderful. Maybe if you can define for us again, I know we kind of talked about it at the beginning of this session, define PTSD, even for those who are just now joining us. What is PTSD?
Okay, I'm going to talk about it in general, and then maybe later in the broadcast we'll talk how it affects fathers.
Okay.
If that's okay.
That'll be wonderful.
Okay, but PTSD, of course, is the acronym for post-traumatic stress disorder. I know a lot of people are familiar with that term, but how it manifests itself is after someone is or has been exposed to a traumatic event, and they may develop either physical, mental, or emotional issues. For example, someone who has been involved in maybe a serious accident or has been the victim of a violent assault like rape or robbery or kidnapping. And then most of us associate the disorder with people who are in active duty or who are in the military. The other thing is that a person can develop PTSD witnessing a traumatic event. So you don't have to be directly a victim of the event. You can just be an observer and just, witness someone else being traumatized. And you can develop PTSD that way also.
Okay, that's good. Yeah, I agree with that. You can whether or not you're involved in that situation or not, but a lot of times witnessing this. And then,
Right.
I even think about, sometimes, or things that I've heard in the news like lately.
Mm-hmm.
A young man found his mother dead. Here, I believe it was here in Chicago, one of the suburbs or something. I can't think of the name of the
Mm-hmm.
suburb right now, but a young man had been in the area, been in the neighborhood, and unfortunately, he, attacked this woman, slit her throat and everything, and killed her. Now, the son came in and found his mom dead,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and so
How
that in
sad.
and of itself is
Yeah.
traumatic,
Yeah.
to find
It
your
is.
mom. So,
It is.
when I think about stuff like this, it's like you really have to pray for individuals. You just never know
Mm-hmm.
what kind of
Mm-hmm.
effect that's going to have on him. So if he doesn't
Right.
get the necessary help that he needs, maybe therapy or what have you, who knows, again, what kind of
Right.
impact that will have on his life. God forbid he turns to, a life of crime or something like that because he's so angry about what happened to his mom,
Right.
or anything.
Right. Yeah.
So,
Because it can be very debilitating, and that particular disorder, of course, can, like you say, interrupt just normal functioning. To experience something traumatic, I can't imagine someone uh, discovering their parent
right.
uh, deceased that way, especially uh, as the result of an act of violence. I mean, it's traumatizing enough to witness or to discover the body of your parent, but when there has been violence or something like that, that
Hmm.
is a very traumatic thing. And even though we all experience trauma or some type of disaster in our lifetime, uh, people are pretty resilient for the most part,
Okay.
and they usually recover. But for some things that we go through or some things that we experience, it's hard to recover from. And that incident that you mentioned would certainly be one of those things.
Right. Yeah, definitely. And it's I had a guest on my show, Apostle David Rogers, and he actually had a forum, and we were kind of just sitting around talking about things like this, and how our children are affected by certain
Hmm.
things in the news. He said we can't forget about them.
Right.
You see, I mean, because how often you see, stories on the news just as what I just described, or worse, or what have you, and then, like, oh, that's a shame, and then sometimes we just go on about our business. But, I think, maybe like, okay, even as a Christian, we should stop and we should pray for that family. We should stop and pray for those children,
Hmm.
because again, I mean, everybody takes things differently. You don't know how that has affected them.
Right.
And
Absolutely.
so it's a whole lot that goes into that. We
Hmm.
just can't dismiss it as, oh, they'll be okay, or not even think about them at all.
Absolutely. I know we had, I know you've probably heard, I think it was a couple of years ago, we had an incident where a police officer shot a young man um, in the street. The young man's name was Michael Brown. I'm sure you've heard of that.
Yes, ma'am.
And not only did that affect his family, but the entire community was traumatized because, of course, we saw the body laying in the middle of the street because they left him there for
Yeah.
quite a long time. And when we saw the scenes where his mom was just, oh, she was just so distressed and so distraught. So we saw that, and we saw the footage of the riots and all of that. So for a long time, we had to set up some emergency uh, centers for the people who were affected by that. Not only just that we heard, just hearing about something like that is traumatizing, but actually seeing footage of things like that. So I know for a while at our counseling center, we had to set up, and open it up to the people who were affected by that particular incident. It was very disastrous. And then for months afterwards, we still were dealing with the effects of that. And we still are to some degree dealing with that particular incident, because it just sparked seemingly just a whole, series of violent incidents that were similar in nature to that particular one.
Okay. I was trying to find, I had a quote here, and maybe I can try to find it. Apostle Rogers had given us some information about, let's see, I don't know if it was necessarily post-traumatic stress disorder, but he was talking about fatherlessness. And maybe we can kind of take a little turn there and talk about how you're not having the father in the home, how that impacts individuals, how that impacts the children, and so that, we can stress the importance of fathers, and their responsibility, but maybe kind of talk about, fatherlessness, and what impact that has. So, there was something that he actually quoted. He talked about fatherlessness having the same impact as individuals who have done at least 2 tours of duty in the military. Are you familiar with that?
Are you talking about? Are you talking about fathers who were absent from the home?
Correct.
Because they were in the military?
No, not because, but saying that that's equivalent. So the effect that it would have on the children is equivalent. The effect of not having the dad in the home is equivalent to the effect of individuals who have been in Iraq, two tours of duty in Iraq. That's something that and I'm trying to find it. I apologize for it, but that kind of what popped up in my mind.
Yeah, I'm trying to make the connection, but definitely not having a father in the home is really affects the children a great deal. I know from a personal aspect, my father was not in the home. And even though later my mom did remarry, and we had an excellent stepfather, but I was always cognitive of the fact that my biological father was not in the home. And there was a void there, even though, they're a good father, so to speak, but I always knew that my father, my biological father, the man who caused me to be on the earth was not there in the home. So therefore, I saw him on occasion, but to me, it still was not enough. It was never enough because I didn't have that consistency that, that I needed from my father.
Right.
So it affected me a great deal. And also, most mothers, the ones who maybe don't remarry or whatever, I find that most of them try to be both father and mother. And that's, it's good, and, they try to fulfill that fatherly role, but it's not an ideal situation because a mom can never be a dad.
Right.
A mom can never be a dad. And so you still feel that void. You still feel that empty heart because your father is not involved in your life. And so you miss a great deal. You miss some things. You miss that fatherly figure present even at the dinner table,
Definitely.
You miss him being there. You miss him coming to school functions. You miss him coming to sports events. And you always feel like, especially when you see other children with their fathers, you always feel left out, and you always feel lost. So, and then you have to deal with that. You have to deal with that growing up. And a lot of children, although my father never was abusive towards me, I still resent him not being there. And of course, I was too young to understand
Wow.
That the relationship or the marriage had failed. And I frankly didn't care. I just felt like they should be together just for the sake of me, you know.
Right.
But I resented him for a long time. And it took me a while to forgive him for not being there, if that makes sense.
It does. It makes a lot of sense. And a lot of people deal with that more than we know and more than they will say. Mm-hmm. I found the quote here, and he says, fatherlessness or PTSD is equivalent to an 18-year-old serving 4 tours in Vietnam War. So he's saying that impact. And I can tend to agree with that, because we don't realize, and I don't think the people or the world realizes how important it is for fathers to be there in the home. I mean, it's just as simple as that. And, I know there are various reasons, that the father's not there, but I just like you saying that your father wasn't there in the home, but then still having that impact was important, and being present, in their lives. There would be times that I would think that, and I still believe this. Now, I believe my dad, even though they were divorced, as I stated earlier, he would come around, he would have his weekend, we would have our weekends with him. But I think also that having him in the home, a lot of decisions I wouldn't have made if he was in the home. A lot of things that I encountered, I know that I would not have encountered if my dad was there, present in the home.
I can definitely relate to that.
Some decisions I made, and God knows I made a whole lot of wrong decisions. I firmly believe that, if he was there, that I would not have made those decisions, and I would not have encountered some of the things that I encountered. But, I believe all things happen for a reason. I know that, God, is in control of everything, but I firmly believe that it is important. Dads have a place, and their place is very important, and we can't, discount that or not acknowledge them. So, if we don't do anything on today, I just want to encourage the dads, with your children, with your grandchildren, be there for them. If it's a situation where you are not, still involved with the mother, whether you're not married to her anymore or whatever, but still make sure you have that connection in your child's life. Now, God forbid she's trying to keep you away from the children. I hope that that's not the case. But, if it's a situation like that, Dr. Joyce, what would you advise the dads if they're trying to, they want to be in their child's life, but the mother is making it difficult for them? We can say a nice like that. If she's making it difficult for them.
Well, I think it's so vitally important for the father. And if the mom is trying to hinder his efforts in being involved with the children, I would not involve the children directly. I would never advise that the children get involved and they have to, take sides. I would never advise that. What I will advise is that father try to reason with that mom, and then if that doesn't work, I strongly suggest that he seeks a legal involvement.
Yes.
So that he can be present in the lives of those children. It's just that important. It is just that important. And once the courts step in and, of course, make a decision,
right?
And then, to me, that brings in objectivity, because that judge is going to be objective, and he's going to advocate on those children's behalf and do what's best for the child.
Right.
If that father has not been abusive and those children are not in danger in being involved with him, by all means, he should be allowed to see his children.
Yes, I would agree. And again, you have to put your differences aside.
Absolutely.
Again, and do like you said the courts would do. Do what's best for the children.
Right.
So, I mean, there's a whole lot we can get into with this, and I'm thinking of so many different things. And you even mentioned about how your dad was not in the home, but then your mom got remarried. Now, I will say this, about my family, about my mom. When my parents were divorced, now, and I'm not bragging, but my mom, she was a looker, so she had suitors after she was divorced, and gentlemen who wanted to be the next Mr. or whatever. But one thing I appreciated about my mom, she did not bring men in over us. She did not do that, and I appreciated that fact. She could have had, some of them were, nice that were looking after her, but she didn't do it. She would not do it. She respected her children. She respected her home. And, and then that's another thing too, because you never know sometimes if something's going to work out. Why get those children attached, to someone, and then it doesn't work out,
Right.
So you have to be
I think that was commendable of your mom to consider her children before her own, maybe even if she was lonely or she wanted male companionship, she was mindful of how it would affect her children.
Right.
And to me, that's commendable. That is really taken into consideration how that would impact you, because like you said, you do develop attachment.
Yes.
I mean, and if that particular relationship didn't work out, then, and then, they form a relationship with someone else, and then you have to, you develop another attachment.
Right.
It's really difficult.
Yeah.
It's really difficult for children.
And then you're sending them on an emotional roller coaster,
mm-hmm.
which they shouldn't have to. These are babies. I don't care how old they are. They're still your babies. And so you should, appreciate them and consider their feelings, and not throw them into whatever you're involved in. You have to be so careful. God has entrusted these children to you. So you have to be careful. And I know somebody probably saying, you don't have any children. How are you talking like this? Well, I'm just, I'm maybe talking from my parents' point of view. I don't know. But it's something to really think about. You have to be so careful. You get these, I see so many times these girls and then these guys, they get so attached to these males that come in, then things don't work out, and then everybody's disappointed and heartbroken and this, that, and the other. Now, I'll give you an example of something that this probably could have happened with just the other day. I was listening to a story on the news, and my heart is still breaking over this. This man, I don't know how it was, in the 30s or something, he killed a 12-year-old girl. Now, let me tell you how this happened. So as the story started unraveling, then I started understanding what was going on. He was the ex-boyfriend of her mother. Okay. And I guess he had just gotten out of jail, because he had he was in jail for trying to attack her mother.
Oh my.
So he had just gotten out of jail, and I guess he went back to wherever she lived and wanted, I guess she let him back in or what have you, and things seemed like they were going well. Well, I guess they must have got into an argument or something, and it was something about cigarettes or something. So she went ahead and left the house, and she took her daughter with her. They had the argument, took her daughter with her. Well, she came back, this is what the news said, with the cigarettes. She had her daughter to take the cigarettes up to him. And when the girl came in, he grabbed her and attacked her and killed her.
Oh my God.
Now, the mother's downstairs in the car.
Oh no.
And they said they could hear her saying, Daddy, no, don't do this to me. So she, I guess he had been in this woman's life for, so many years. She was 12. I think they said she was real young when he first came into their lives. And so she was used to calling him daddy. So you see what I'm talking about with this emotional roller coaster?
Yes.
And getting attached. So, I was, and I'm sitting here when I'm listening to the story, my heart is just breaking, just literally breaking.
Okay.
Now this mom does not have her daughter any longer. You know, and we have to be conscious of these decisions that we make. Oh my gosh.
Absolutely.
And
That's so
how they
sad.
will affect our children. I'm sorry, I kind of went off a little bit again.
My Lord. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
so, but it does happen. And I think we need to be aware that things like that, there is a potential that can happen. And so we have to be really extra cautious when we invite people into our lives when we have children.
Yeah, you have to be so careful. And I think sometimes, you know, I thank you for saying that you appreciate how my mom, you know, did not do that, because you know, I'm looking at a comment here. Brandy was commenting on that story. Brandy McCord, she says he killed that innocent baby. She said, and the mother is fully to blame. So you have to. Now I would agree with that statement, because you have to be careful again of what you're doing to your children, what you're allowing them access to, who you're allowing to come in over them. And it's no joke. I mean, you may, you know, maybe you're divorced, maybe you desire companionship, but there's still a way to do everything, you know, and you have to be careful of what you do and how you do it. You know, I
certainly do.
I feel for this I feel for this woman. I really do.
Me too.
But
she's lost her child.
Yes, definitely. Let's I know we start talking about fatherlessness. Do you have any statistics or something that you can share with us on fatherlessness? And I'm looking at some things here, but I'm not sure if you have anything that you want to share with us.
I am looking at I know we've been talking about fathers who may be absent from the home, and I was thinking about fathers who maybe suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder, and it really sometimes the fathers are present physically, but they may not be present emotionally.
Or
mentally. A lot of times when a father is suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, whether it's from war or whatever it is from, you actually lose that father, maybe not physically, but you lose that father emotionally, because they are able to really interact or really engage, not only with that mother, but also they're not able to engage with those children, even though they are there. And I don't know which is worse, not having them there physically or seeing them there and them not engaging.
Okay, right. Okay. That's good.
So, yeah. And so when a father is not present, either physically or mentally, it leaves an indelible void. And then I want to talk about the children for a minute, because you were talking about how important it is for children to, as much as we can, to protect them.
Yes.
To protect them. And even when, I'm thinking about even when the mom has a new baby, I've heard that oftentimes a father feels sort of left out when maybe the baby is born, because the mother has to spend a great deal of time with that baby.
Right.
And so it's important that the mom involves that father and makes sure that he does not feel excluded, because there's such a thing as postpartum depression with fathers.
Yes.
Now, the difference between the fathers and the mom, and I do have statistics. Yes,
okay.
Thank you.
No problem.
I got tongue-tied. I do have stats. I'll just say it like that.
Okay.
on that, and stats say that between 3 to 10% of fathers suffer from postpartum stress. And we think mostly that moms do, which they do. But moms experience that because they're having some hormonal issues or some hormonal upheaval.
Right.
And most of the times when the fathers are feeling this postpartum symptom, they're usually feeling it from what's going on with the mom, but they feel it nonetheless.
Okay.
So it's important to include that father in every activity, every interaction with that child as much as it is possible. And I think that's really important to note that.
Okay.
And then also, sometimes fathers are already, because they are the head and they typically are the breadwinners, a lot of times they are already struggling maybe with financial problems. They may be struggling with some form of depression. They may be struggling with conflicts in the relationship. So it's really important to, even though men are kind of silent sufferers, they may not let you know that they are suffering or that they are being affected, but many times they are. And we kind of have to reach out to them and kind of draw them in to find out what's happening with them. And Sunday is Father's Day. So I think that we need to really be aware that fathers, even though we say the restaurants aren't as full and they may not get much attention, but I think we need to maybe shift that and just change the paradigm on that and try to reach out and show the fathers more attention,
Yes.
I think that's really important. I'm so glad that you have this topic. It's so timely, not only because it's Father's Day, but because just fathers in general play a very vital role in the family and in the lives of their wives and children, especially.
Yes. So important. So important. Definitely. This is good. Yeah, I am glad that we are recognizing this as well on today, because we don't want to leave them out. I am going to do a quick break here and we'll come back. I know I'm kind of off my little timing here, but that's okay. I'm looking real quick on Facebook Live. Brandy also says that PTSD can be suffered after the trauma of being in prison for many years as well. I totally agree with that. I think we had mentioned something about that earlier in the session. I'm not sure, but yes, that's right, Brandy, because PTSD can affect so many areas, and sometimes we don't even realize that that's what an individual is dealing with. PTSD.
Yeah.
Because
so when we come back from the break, maybe I can share some of the symptoms.
That'll be wonderful. Yeah, that'll be wonderful. We can talk about the symptoms of PTSD when we come back. You are listening to Mind, Body, and Soul with Annette. We are here on Intellectual Radio.
Made up my mind that it's my time to press on towards the mark that God has for me. I wiped away my tears and thrown away some fears. I'm standing strong and moving on to what God has for me. For the race is not given to the swift. No, it's not given to the strong. Not even to the bold, but to the one who can hold on. Whoa, you gotta keep moving. You gotta keep pressing on towards the mark God is giving you. That God is giving you. that God has given you. For the race is not given. Ooh, no, it's not given. Not even to the, but to the one who can hold on. Hold on. Keep moving. Pressing on. Keep moving. Pressing on. Keep moving. Keep pressing on. Keep moving. Keep pressing on. Hold on. You gotta just hold on. Don't get weary, hold on. Don't give up, hold on.
All right, welcome back here on Intellectual Radio. And you have just been listening to Keep Moving, and that is by none other than Zoriante Brown and the Willing Souls. Beautiful music there. Make sure you go and get that project. I believe the title of that is Now is the Time. Zoriante Brown and the Willing Souls. So we are glad that you have supplied that music for us on today. Thank you so much. So we are back, and we have Dr. Joyce Graham on the line now, and she's calling in all the way from St. Louis, and we are discussing PTSD. We're also discussing our dads. And again, I want to say, and I will be saying it throughout the show, Happy Father's Day to all of you who are fathers. We are coming up to this wonderful, momentous occasion on this coming Sunday. I know some of you have probably lost your dads, and they're no longer here on the earth, but you can recognize their memory, and then those of you who are still blessed to have your dads here, let's recognize them on this weekend and celebrate them. So before we went to break, Dr. Joyce says she wanted to discuss the symptoms of PTSD. So why don't we kind of go into that area right now? Dr. Joyce, what are the symptoms of PTSD? Mm-hmm. And I think you want to do something else with that as well.
Yeah, I do. I kind of want to talk about a couple of things. And the first thing I want to talk about are the signs of PTSD. I also want to talk about the different types, because I think a lot of people aren't aware that there are about 5 different types of PTSD. And then I want to probably end with what a person can do, what kind of treatment is available for this particular disorder. But first, I want to again reiterate that anybody can develop PTSD. Adults, men and women, adolescents, and also young children. And the way that young children typically develop this disorder is that usually there is some ongoing trauma occurring, because children are usually very, resilient, and they usually spring back if it's just one incident. But usually with children, if something is ongoing, like bullying at school or sexual abuse, something like that.
Okay.
And if it's ongoing like that, then they are in danger of developing the PTSD disorder.
Okay.
But some of the signs, basically there are three major signs or symptoms. And the first one is, which I think is the most prevalent, flashbacks and the nightmares and the intrusive thoughts of the event. In other words, like I said earlier, all of us experience trauma in our lives, and we usually recover. But if we don't recover, I would say in about maybe a month after that traumatic event has occurred, then we start noticing symptoms like the flashbacks, the nightmares, and the intrusive thoughts. In other words, that thing keeps playing back in your mind over and over again. You either dream about it or you sit up and you about it. You actually have flashbacks. You see the scene. You sometimes even feel the fear and the terror of whatever it was that happened. And then, so after that, some people start to deliberately avoid those places or those activities or whatever it was that are associated with that particular event. I mean, you deliberately avoid. I mean, even if you have to drive miles out of your way to avoid that particular place or building or whatever it is, wherever that incident occurred, you'll do whatever you can to avoid it.
Wow.
The other thing is difficulty sleeping and concentrating and just feeling irritable and nervous and just not feeling, yourself.
Okay.
A lot of people describe it that way. I just don't feel like myself, So when that goes on for any length of time, particularly as long as a month following that particular event, then you kind of start suspecting that they may be it. And then the other thing is that there are 5 different types of PTSD, and I'll go through these really quickly. I'll name them all first, and then I'll go quickly through them one by one. The first one is normal PTSD. The second one is acute. The third is uncomplicated. The fourth is comorbid. And the last is complex. And then they kind of escalate in terms of seriousness in the order that I named them.
Okay.
When it's normal, it's usually, you maybe have been exposed to a single traumatic event, okay? But you recover fairly quickly, maybe within a couple of weeks, because you've probably developed a way to explore, to process, and maybe to even identify some ways of coping. So that's a normal stress response.
Okay.
The other is acute, and that is that you have like an immediate trauma reaction. Some people you see who have been exposed to something traumatic, they need immediate help right away because they either go into shock or they faint, they collapse, things of that nature, and they need immediate, maybe medical attention and maybe psychotherapy or something like that, or a combination of both. So that's acute. Uncomplicated PTSD is just a persistent re-experiencing the event over and over and over again, to the point where you become debilitated and you just aren't able to resume your normal functioning, like going to work or even going to church. I mean, you just kind of isolate yourself,
Mm-hmm.
and you really don't want to be involved in maybe some activities that you used to enjoy. So that's uncomplicated because it's just that you're re-experiencing it over and over again. But there's a good chance that you will recover eventually. Then there's comorbid, which is the fourth one. In this particular type of PTSD, you have PTSD with another coexisting disorder, like depression or alcohol or substance abuse, maybe an anxiety disorder. So while you're experiencing the PTSD, you're also experiencing depression or substance abuse or anxiety or something like that. So you're not only dealing with PTSD, you're dealing with some other disorder on top of that. And then finally, there's the complex PTSD, which is an extreme form. Now, this is when, as I said, and I mentioned earlier, when you're exposed to the traumatic circumstance, it's prolonged. It's happening over and over and over again, like sexual abuse, like I mentioned, being bullied, or for women, domestic violence, just over and over and over again for a prolonged period of time.
Wow.
That is complex and that is extreme because you're getting the opportunity to recover. And then you're constantly living in fear or the threat of that traumatic event happening again. So
wow,
it's a pretty serious disorder, and it needs to be addressed. And we need to be aware of the fact that it's not just being in combat or active military duty.
Right.
PTSD exists when there is something that we can't recover from.
Okay.
For whatever reason. So if someone who's listening maybe think that they're suffering from this disorder, or even if they know someone who maybe have some of the symptoms that I mentioned, the very first thing that you want to do is first you want to get an official diagnosis. That's very important.
Mm-hmm.
You want to make sure that that is what this is and it's not something else. Because different disorders, different mental illnesses are treated differently.
Okay.
There are different interventions for different mental struggles. I'll say it like that. So you want to make sure that you get an official diagnosis, first of all. Because the more that you know and the more that you find out, the more support that you can have. And then the other thing is, once that diagnosis is official, you want to do two things. You either want to go to a medical professional or health professional, or maybe both.
Okay.
And then it doesn't matter what order you go in. I mean, if you go to a counselor, if that counselor thinks that there's something medical going on, that you need medical attention to deal with that, they will refer you to a doctor. Same way with the doctor.
Okay.
You visit a doctor first, and of course, if they think that you need counseling, they will make the referral.
I want to see if I can interject here, and I don't know if you have any more treatments that you want to get to, but I want to be transparent here for a moment, and I want to do this because, I'm listening to the signs that you gave us and then the types. I want to be transparent because sometimes we may be dealing with things like this and we don't really realize that this is possibly what this could be.
Mm-hmm.
As you were talking, for one of the first things you said, okay, of course, anyone can develop this. And then so like 1 month, but at least about a month after you have experienced a traumatic event, symptoms can occur. And you talked about having dreams. You even talked about avoiding the places associated where that particular traumatic event happened.
Right.
You also discussed difficulty sleeping, difficulty concentrating and not
Mhm.
feeling like yourself. Now I'm
Right.
going to tell you, my brother, and many have heard this story, in 1983, he was murdered.
Oh my.
Those that I just reiterated what you told us, I
Mhm.
experienced every last one of those.
Oh
I
my.
would have these dreams, and I got to the point where I didn't trust people because I couldn't understand why someone else would murder someone. I was what,
Mhm.
maybe 14, 15 years old at the time, and I couldn't sleep. I had difficulty sleeping. The only way I could sleep was if the TV and the lights were on.
Mhm. Oh my.
I avoided the building, the store where he was murdered. I avoided that place
Mhm.
for years. I didn't even want to go down that street.
Mhm.
I didn't even want to go in that neighborhood, in that area. I really did not feel like myself. I remember even thinking it was we were trying to prepare for the funeral,
Mhm.
and there was a mall that we would always frequent. We'd always go to that mall, and I remember driving up to that mall with my family, and we got out of the car, and when I looked around, everything looked so different. It was
Oh
the same
my.
mall that we've been to the year for,
Mhm.
but
Mhm.
everything looked so different. I didn't feel like myself. Things didn't look the same.
I
Everything just looked
understand.
so different. And so
Mhm.
I experienced that. And I believe I don't know, maybe whether it was a normal a form of PTSD or what have you. I know I experienced something. I know I did.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
I never went and got what'd you say, go get an official diagnosis. I never did do that.
Mhm.
But I know that affected me. Me
Mhm.
being the youngest, me being the baby.
Mhm.
And I remember even one time we had moved into a different house after that. And at this time, since my brother was gone, it was only my mom and my sisters. And we
Mhm.
were preparing to go to, I think we were going to a picnic or something. I think my church, they were trying to do something, it was something that they
Mhm.
would normally do, trying to get us out the house. And so we were preparing to go, we were getting our stuff together. And I remember the phone ringing. Now we were running behind, keep that in mind.
Mhm.
The phone rang. I picked up the phone and I said, hello. And the person said, what are y'all doing? You better get out of there. That's the first thing they said.
Oh
And I
my.
immediately hung up the phone because it scared me. And I'm
Mhm.
thinking something else is happening, in relation to when my brother was killed. But
Mhm.
it was a friend of mine, like, why are you
Oh
guys
my.
late? Where you get out of the house? Why are you still there? That's all she
Mhm.
was saying. But
Mhm.
my mind went back. It went
Mhm. That
back.
was a trigger. Yeah.
Yes, it
Triggered
was.
that.
It scared
Mhm.
me so, Dr. Joyce, I hung up the phone and I was like, oh my God.
Oh my
So
goodness.
yeah, and then, I later realized who it was that was calling. But
Yes.
yeah, so those things, that's why I say I want to be transparent, because sometimes people may be dealing with certain issues or certain things like that, maybe similar.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it sounds like what happened to you, I experienced the same thing.
Okay.
And I thank you and I appreciate your transparency because I want to be transparent as well. Because when you were talking about your brother, I thought about what happened to me as well. And I think what happened in both our cases was sounds like we were experiencing grief
Yes.
as well as PTSD. This is what happened to me, something similar. And I'll get through this really quickly.
Okay.
But last year in November, my daughter passed away. I have
Mm.
3 children. Now I have 2 girls and a boy, and my middle girl passed away
Mm.
quite suddenly.
So sorry.
And so it's been about maybe 7 months, and I'm still, I'm still in grief, but not as intense. But anyway, I noticed that after she passed away, I did, all the things, making the arrangements and everything. And as long as I was busy like that, doing that kind of, busy, what I call busy stuff,
Mm-hmm.
I was getting through my days. But after everything was over, uh, and her bedroom was downstairs, there was about, I don't know how long it took me to go back down there.
Mm.
The apartment where she lived, it was a while before I could even drive down that street. But then I started even feeling some physical symptoms that I didn't associate with PTSD because I'm a counselor, right?
Right.
And I should be able to deal with, at least know what was happening to me. I did not.
Wow.
Somebody asked me the question, and I know they meant well, but they asked me, they said, well, you're a counselor, so does that help with your grief? I said, absolutely not. knowing the symptoms, knowing the textbook terms and all of that has nothing to do with the way that I feel as a mom losing her child.
Yes.
I have to deal with that the way that everybody else deals with grief and stress. But anyway, I started having physical symptoms, and I would start hyperventilating, and it felt like I was actually having problems breathing. So I thought there was something really physically wrong, and I went to the doctor. And he, asked the questions and did the examination. He said, has anything happened to you recently? And I told him about my daughter, and he said, you are having post-traumatic stress.
Wow.
He didn't say it in those terms. He just said it to where I knew the term that he was referring to.
Right.
And so I was having really panic attacks is what I was having.
Yes.
And they were really physical symptoms to where I couldn't even catch my breath. And it felt like I was going to collapse. But as time went on, it went away. It went away after a while. But yeah, and that just goes to show you anybody could suffer from this disorder.
Oh, yes.
I think knowing and being aware of what's going on in your body, in your mind, with your emotions, that's the first step. And it can happen to anybody who experiences a traumatic event. And I can't think of anything worse. I've lost a mom, I lost a dad, I lost a sibling, but losing a child, and I'm not trying to equate that with anybody else's grief because everybody experiences grief differently. But there was something different. I think you mentioned it too, Annette. You mentioned the fact of carrying that child in your body. How close can you get? You can't get much closer than
No, you can't. Not with to a person.
So I went through those same symptoms, and I went to the doctor. I did because I knew that there was something terribly wrong, but I did not know that that's what it was.
Wow. That is something, I tell you. Well, thank you for being transparent. We appreciate that. Yeah, again, because you never know who our stories will help. You never know.
Absolutely.
Sometimes people are suffering and they may think that they're the only one suffering from that particular situation when all along maybe a couple of the people that you probably know are suffering from the same thing, but they're not revealing it or not saying it.
Absolutely.
But thank you so much for that, and our condolences to you, and the loss of your daughter. I know it's still recent for you, and that's interesting that person asked you the question whether or not, because you're a counselor, is that different? I actually, as you were talking, as you were saying that, I honestly believe that what propelled me into the area of psychology is because of some of the things that I dealt with in my own family, or some of the things that I've dealt with over the years. And so then my mind gets to wondering,
that's kind of typical of counselors, because when you experience, trauma and hardship and trials and in your own personal life, I think that God gives us compassion, but we want to reach out and help somebody else get through it,
Right. Yeah. It's like your heart kind of goes out and you have this compassion, on individuals. And then, maybe the situations that you went through, you don't want anybody else to really experience that. Or if they do, you want to try and, like you said, help them through it. So, yeah, I think that's where my mindset was. And, God has a reason for everything, too.
He does.
He really does. So I know some of the things that I've gone through and experienced, it didn't feel too good. But, if it can help someone else, then then all glory to God. That's all I can say.
Yes.
Yes, as we're wrapping up here, I would love to know if you can maybe help us out. Maybe you can kind of reiterate, like you talked about the treatment, but then kind of bring this into maybe a summary of what the two subjects that we were discussing, about the fathers and then PTSD. You know, if maybe think of if someone came to you, needing your assistance as a counselor, what would you say to them? How would you help them? Maybe we can go that route before we leave. But
Okay.
but let me do this before you do. I see a comment
Okay.
here that I did miss here on Facebook Live. Brandy McCord says, that's good. Society doesn't allow a man to show he's struggling or suffering with something because we view it as weakness. And I believe she's referring to the conversations that we were having earlier on fathers.
Right.
And she
Right.
says they need to feel safe enough to share and be counseled by someone. And that's something in and of itself. That's a very good statement. Because again, we talked about roles, and what society has placed, on the role of a woman, on the role of a man, on the role of a mother and of a father. So, sometimes they may, be feeling, as if they need some counseling, but then they probably think, okay, they're going to think I'm weak, if I try and go and get some kind of assistance or what have you. But we have to get beyond that stigma, for sure.
Right.
Or else we're just going to sit and suffer.
Right.
And why suffer? Why suffer in silence? Why suffer at all? Especially if the help is available. And, for those who are Christians, some still have the stigma. They don't want to deal with counselors. I mean, we got to get beyond that as well. I preach about that all the time on my show. I really do. We got to get beyond that because I believe that God has individuals in place. You're a Christian woman, but you're also an LPC. So, I mean, you know your job, you know how to incorporate even, what God has given you to help individuals, along their way. But I talk too much sometimes, but if you give me a quick summary here.
No, you're fine. I really, really enjoy your expertise, if you will, in this particular area because I know you're studying, and there's really I would just say God is using you in this area, and I'm just so thankful to Him that we connected.
Yes.
Because I think this is a God connection, and I appreciate
Definitely.
you so much. I think you really, I think you kind of summed it up. I would just echo what you've already said.
Okay.
And that is that I think I want to reiterate the point that you made when you said that there is such a stigma in the community, and I want to say the African American community. I want to address that particular geographic because we, in general, have always been, I guess, encouraged, if I could say it that way, to be strong and take care of ourselves. And most times we could not afford to go to the doctor or counselor or whatever. We couldn't afford it. And there is a stigma because we are strong people and we're used to taking care of things ourselves.
Right.
I think we also mentioned that fathers or men in general are silent sufferers, which means that they aren't likely to reach out when they are struggling mentally, spiritually, physically, emotionally, or financially. Men just don't reach out. So I think that we as a community, the onus is on us to just be aware of how they are responding to some of the difficulties, some of the struggles, some of the burdens that they are facing. We need to be aware. If you see not just, the man, but since we are talking about the men, but if you see anybody who is exhibiting the symptoms that I mentioned, the nightmares and the flashbacks, and because you can tell, I mean, you just have to be observant.
Yes.
And you can see what's going on with people by body language. And it's okay to go up to them and just do a check and say, are you okay? When you notice that people who have been through a trauma, and you notice that they are deliberately avoiding people and places that they used to frequent. If you see this and you're aware of it, just kind of, talk to them, approach them about it. If they mention that they're having difficulty sleeping or concentrating, or you notice that they're a person who is usually calm and approachable, all of a sudden they're distant, they're irritated, they're angry, then you know something out of the ordinary. Damn. And so it's perfectly fine to do a check-in.
Yes.
And say, are you okay? What's going on with you? And then too, we're in a position, God has blessed us as a people with several resources.
Yes.
That we can access. And most of us are Christians, if not all of us are Christians who are probably listening or who will listen to this broadcast. And we have to know that our God is holistic. He is holistic. He is a God of spirit, mind, and body.
Yes.
And there's a scripture that says that He would that we would be in health, or that we would prosper and be in health, even as our soul prospers. So that shows you that God's concerned about every area of our lives.
Yes.
And so, yeah, we do go to church, and we do have prayer. We do have spiritual leaders, and we do have access to what we need. But also, God has, I believe, assigned counselors to us as a people.
Yes.
And and the stigma that's attached to this, it really is right now. It's just totally preventing us from getting the help that we really need.
Yes. I would agree.
And and we can offset full-blown disorders if we recognize the signs and we get attention and we get help before it's too late. In other words, that we become proactive in our mental health as well as our physical health. So
I would agree.
Yeah.
I was just thinking that as you were saying that, being, you mentioned earlier about knowing yourself and knowing your body. So, we, just as we do for our physical health, we have to do for the mental as well. And thank you for that summary. And I'm so glad that you said all of that, because yes, we definitely, I think the key again is to be observant of our loved ones. Be, as we're talking about fathers, be observant of our fathers. If you go out this weekend, be observant. If you see any kind of change in his behavior or, actions and or reactions, be observant. Like you said, just sit down and talk. It doesn't hurt for you to ask them anything. And, ask them, are they okay? Don't be combative. Don't say, hey, I saw you doing it. What's no, be nice about it. Ask the Lord to word your mouth, because you're concerned and you want to, want them to get, whatever help that they need, if they need help, So I think it's so important. Dr. Joyce, I appreciate you again. I'm going to wrap up because I've just been given my time here. And I appreciate you for joining us. And this is not your last time. Just so you'll know, you have given us some nuggets and some information that we definitely could use. And, I don't take it for granted. And I do appreciate you and what the Lord is doing for you in your life.
Thank you, and you as well.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful. We're wrapping up here, and we're going to go in a few more moments. I just want to thank each and every one of you who have joined us on Facebook Live. I see those who have joined in since I have acknowledged individuals. Anthony Reddit, Evangelist, Victoria, good to have you as well, and Demetrius Hunt. And I hope I got everyone. I hope I didn't miss anyone. Again, I want to say happy Father's Day to each and every one of you. We appreciate you. We love you. Each and every one of you that are fathers, of course. We love you, we appreciate you, and we pray that you have a wonderful weekend, enjoying your families, enjoying your time here. So next week, we're going to have a very hot topic. I want you all to make sure that you stay tuned. I'm going to have a wonderful guest in the studio, Demetria Brand Triplett, all the way from the state of Mississippi. And our hot topic on next week, we're going to talk about Christians, singles, and sex. Having sex. Christian singles having sex. That's what we're going to talk about. I know I want to throw that in there real quick. You're probably like, what is she talking about? So tune in on next week. We want to talk about this. Intellectual Radio, we will be here. Mind, Body, and Soul with Annette. And until then, I want you to get caught up with
You've
Annette.
just been listening to Mind, Body, and Soul with Annette, where your host, Annette Harris, provided you with psychological and biblical insight for your everyday concerns. Need more insight? Visit Annette's Facebook page at Mind, Body, and Soul with Annette. Don't forget, tune in next week for Mind, Body, and Soul with Annette.